First of all, I think your analysis was very straight line. History doesn't run in a straight line.
Kid, you cannot tell your neighbor he is stealing ducks when you are stealing funds.
As High Commissioner, I was wrong. As Charandas Prasad, I reacted naturally how any person would have.
I did not come here for that kind of abuse. I did not come here for that kind of abuse. If you're going to go down that road, I'll walk off.
But it's all okay once they're talking. If they were talking, I could not have been here today.
You got ADHD. I got
calm down. I think I've done enough in terms of taking our team out of trouble from losing.
Come on, Lou Taylor. You got screwed. I'm reading the script now, and the first person that comes to my mind to play a detective,
yes,
but an erratic detective is Mickey Rodriguez.
Why an African slap an Indian? Why a man and slap a woman? Look, how you deal with that? You deal with that.
We must encourage platforms like this because it brings together different people and allows for discussions to take place in our country on a multiplicity of fundamental issues.
You apologizing for something you think I did is wrong. I don't want you to do that, and you should not have done that. Hi there, good evening. Welcome once again to the Freddie Kissoon Show with co-host Leonard Craig. As you know, I will keep repeating it. There are times when Leonard and I in the studio have exchanges and discussions because people have said that they'd like to hear our interpretation of things. I've said this and I will say it before. When we have guests, we don't get time to elaborate. We don't get space to elongate on the topics we would like to. So we use these shows for the purpose of giving our analysis on social phenomena, political phenomena in Guyana. So welcome to our Wednesday night edition of Leonard Craig and I rapping on the show. We have something to tell you that is shocking, incredible, unbelievable. If you're an African Guyanese, you need to pay careful attention to what I'm saying now. I have always argued, and I have a co-host who has now been arguing. I've always argued that African Guyanese do not deserve the African leadership they got in the past, and they're getting now. What I'm about to tell you is shocking, incredible, and unbelievable. It occurred over a phone call this morning, and the person on the other line was Vincent Alexander. I want you to look in the mirror and examine your eyes and your conscience and tell me if you think this man should represent you. This man is the chairman of the United Nations for the Decade of African Guyanese. This man is the chairman of the Burnham Foundation, honoring the legacy and name of Forbes Burnham. This man is a GCOM commissioner, and this man has been writing letters in the papers the past 30 years, giving his take on things, some of which are torridly controversial. Now, here is what Vincent Alexander said to me. Today, Wednesday, he was to appear on this program to discuss his theory of post-slavery trauma in Guyanese Africans and to examine with James Bond and Ravidev his theory. That was scheduled for today. Alexander called me this morning to say that he wouldn't be on the Freddie Kissoon program anymore because he went to Facebook and he saw the comments on the show he did with Craig and I last Monday, in which he accused Bond of suffering from post-slavery trauma, and he went on to talk about Bond. He was even critical of the president. Vincent Alexander said to me that when he went on his Facebook page, and he saw the comments against him, he cannot appear on the show anymore. He said, he doesn't want to subject himself to those comments. I couldn't believe what he was saying. So I said to him, there are all kinds of comments made about thousands of us who have been in politics for so long. You just get on with your life, get on with your politics, and don't worry with those kinds of people. Those people, you should not worry with them. He said, well, I can't come on the show if I'm going to get those comments. I have to stop here and take a moment of catching my breath. Can you believe Vincent Alexander, that has more than 45 years of public activism, a man who has paid in hundreds of talk shows, written hundreds of letters, and said thousands of things critical of people. He said to me he's not coming on the show anymore because when he saw that comments about him, people say nasty things about him, he can't subject himself to that. So I said to him, you should know the kind of people who say these things on Facebook. Some of them are lonely people, some of them are mad people, some of them don't have anything to do with their time. But why should you shape your politics, your public appearance? Why should you shut out publicly say the things you want to say because you went on Facebook and saw some nasty comments about you? Ladies and gentlemen who are looking at this program now, I just don't want to go on because I can't believe a public figure of 45 years, a man who contested the leadership of the PNC, a man who has 2 letters just last week in the papers with a big exchange with him and Dr. Leslie Ramsamy. He would say to me he resented the comments people made about him on Facebook and what he had to say about James Bond, and he's not coming on the program anymore. That is what Vincent Alexander said. So Vincent Alexander would not make a public appearance on the most watched talk show program. Vincent Alexander viewers for his program the last Monday has reached 60,000 viewers. 70,000 according to Craig. 70,000 people went and listened to what Vincent Alexander had to say. And Vincent Alexander is saying to me, I am not going to espouse my views anymore on your program. I'm not going to address African Guyanese anymore on your program because I don't want people to say those things about me. I am telling you, I just don't know what more to say. I'm at the last of how a person can not go public anymore with their views because people criticize them and people say things nasty about them. I don't want to go on with this. For me, it's bizarre. I will hand over to Leonard right now.
Good night, viewers, and thank you for joining us. And I've said over and over on this program, and I've written in my column, that people like to denigrate others. People like to make public commentary on others and tell others how to behave and all of that. And when they receive even quarter of the same that they dish out on people, they hide and they run what people in Guyana call a little scrawny dog. Now, the nasty attacks that was meted out to myself and James Bond, more James Bond than me. People calling James Bond or calling us lick bottoms and all of that. Vincent Alexander went on a globe span program to reinforce what David Hines said. In other words, to agree with David Hines, and then not what is worse than I wrote in my column Monday Gone. And I entreat you to read that column. What is worse about what Vincent Alexander said on this show is that Vincent Alexander formulated the David Hines invective into a theory, and he proposed all kinds of theories as to why this thing is so. So if this is coming from a conviction, when you are convicted that you are on the right track, do you know when people like Isaac Newton first came up with the theory of gravity, do you know how much people pour scorn on it? Because back in Newton's day, science was not popular. You know what was popular?
Religion.
Religion was popular. And so they pour scorn on Newton. But today, Newton has proven to be, his conviction has proven to be in line with what is happening in the heavens and some other mathematical theory. When I say heavens, I mean in the cosmological, in the skies. And so these guys have a conviction, but they are unable to defend their conviction in public. So they can espouse all these nasty things about other people, but when you say a program and people come under the program and criticize you, you want to run away, you want to scurry away. Now, as Freddie said earlier, that some of these people who hold themselves out to be African leaders, you don't deserve them. You deserve better representation. And again, I want to refer to my column of this week. One of the questions I asked, and I challenge anybody, anywhere in Guyana, anywhere in the world, to show me where APNU AFC of 2015 to 2020, led by an African and a mostly African government, and a government that draw most of their support from Africans. And by the way, the head of that government was a historian. And if you read most of what he wrote, the shape of what he wrote was about African history and struggles. Most of it were couched in those kinds of settings. And they have not made any single policy, not even one. Well, there is a half policy, and I'll explain what it is. But they have not crafted any single policy that will change the circumstances of Afro-Guyanese in Guyana. In other words, even if you got 2 years at the helm, you have got to use those 2 years, because you claim that African Guyanese are subjugated and all the other negatives that African Guyanese have to face. And some people hold the theory that Alexander was trying to portray, that they are things that happen in the village movement that are still affecting Africans. That is your theory, that is what you believe. And then you're holding the reins of power. Even if you got 2 months, people have to see you trying to make a policy that will indelibly change the trajectory of the life of African Guyanese, generally speaking. Further to that, I advocated in my column that the APNU AFC, let's stick with the PNC now, because the core of that government was PNC government, was handed a gift from an external source. So it didn't, the gift that they were handed didn't originate in Guyana, so that you say, oh, You're afraid people call you a racist, that you're formulating policies that will benefit Afro-Guyanese. The gift came from the United Nations that is called the International Decade of People of African Descent. You know what the Granger administration did? They instigated the formation of a private company, of which I think I don't want to misrepresent it and get sued. But Vincent Alexander was either, let's put it this way, he had a major role in the formation and sustenance of that company. And the Granger administration funneled hundreds of millions of dollars to that company. And I challenge any Afro-Guyanese viewer right now to tell me anything that they know of organically that they can think of off the top of your head. I'm not talking about somebody write down a list of things and try to feed it to you. Because it was the decade of people of African descent, it is supposed to be front and center what this organization is doing for Africans. It is supposed to touch your lives everywhere. It's supposed to be ubiquitous. But none of us know about it. None of us know of their activities. And then you want to come and lecture us about you speaking for... Where was David Hines? And Tokumo Ogonsei? Where were these people when the Granger administration was in power? And they have not left a single policy that, and I'm talking about policy or program that will change the circumstances of African Guyanese almost forever. It was supposed to be so indelible that even if 10 white or Indian or any other race government comes into power after that, they're supposed to go so deep to change that. That is how indelible that it is supposed to be in the 5 years that you have. You're supposed to even make legislation, just as how we make Amerindian land titling legislation, to which any government who goes into power have to adhere to those legislation. Affirmative action legislation could have been made. And if you understand what affirmative action is, just as how we are asking, and our current president, Irfan Ali, is on record to the former colonizers of Guyana and the Caribbean that they need to pay reparation. Reparation is a type of affirmative action. Is that they pay some money, the money comes to Guyana and you use it to benefit the descendants of Africans. There is nothing stopping a government locally from also taking similar steps. But up new AFC people, and there's some of them that are crying who don't lick bottom and who don't what and talking about this and that, they have no track record of doing anything to change the circumstances. I am not talking about you form a little group with a little African name and you do a little thing in a corner and you get ladies to wrap their head and hold a program on a stage. And I'm not talking about those things. I am talking about policies that will change the circumstances of African Guyanese. And they have nothing to show for it. And they want to come and theorize. And then when you take them to task, they run and hide. And that is the kind of leadership I am saying that African people do not deserve. They have failed you over and over and over. You have to, as African Guyanese, you have to look elsewhere for your leadership. And in some cases, you have to take matters of leading yourself and family, in some cases, into your own hands. Go back and learn from the village movement and form your groups and so on, and demand things from the government through your local groups. Don't worry with these people. They are going to lead you astray. all they are concerned about is division. And I challenge people to think clearly on some of these issues. I am not saying everything they say is senseless, and that is the thing that people use to trap other people. You bring something in a basket of issues, and you take out one issue that might be right or sound truthful, and then that issue now, you surround it with a lot of mumbo jumbo, and then people gonna say, you know, this man is on the ball. They're not on any ball. These people don't care about you.
Look, I've been a columnist for 36 years. And within those 36 years, I brought out things that African Guyanese leaders have done to African Guyanese. And these people were, some of them are, I said words, some of them were, some of them are, still in political parties, still fooling African people. I remember AFC Youth, who I was quite fond of, and he worked along with me. We got to know him well. His name was Kiefer. Kiefer got charged for 2 grams of marijuana in Kitty. Friday, he got paid, and he was sporting on Sheriff Street, and the police picked him up and took him to Kitty Station. That was Friday. A couple of his friends from AFC rang James Bond to come down to the station. James Bond said, my fee is $70,000 when it comes to drugs. The drug issue, to visit the police station and maybe get him out or get him on bail, is $70,000. Where we're going to find $70,000 on Friday evening? Kiefer slept in the police station on Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. On Monday morning, Kiefer went to court, and I jumped up from the spectator's bench and say, Your Worship, we don't have a lawyer. This is a young man I've known. I am putting my credibility, my name, to ask you to give him self-bail. I know him. I will vouch for him. And she put him on $5,000 bail. That was James Bond at that time in the leadership of the PNC. My column for today, Wednesday, is on a man named Henry Jeffrey. Please read what these people write. Please, when someone criticizes them, forget their name, Posada, Kissoon, and their East Indian, what they know about black people. Check out what black leaders are doing to you. And there are East Indians and Amerindians and mixed race people who have far more integrity and care about you. So my column today is on a man named Henry Jeffrey. And when I read what Jeffrey wrote, I said, look at this man who writes letters in the press. He's he's a columnist for an online newspaper called Village Voice. And everything is about Africans, the wrongs that are being done to them. And my column today is a rebuttal of what Jeffrey said. And you want to know, as an African, look at what's inside these people's head, and they cannot liberate you because of what is in their head. Jeffrey wrote about autocratic countries in Asia and Africa. I am telling you, this is what Jeffrey wrote about autocratic countries in Asia and Africa and Guyana. What did Jeffrey left out? The continent of Europe. So there are autocratic governments in Asia, Africa, and Guyana, but there are no autocratic countries in Europe. Jeffrey didn't mention Germany, where a young lady, her name is Ashma John. You heard about the famous splashmans. Everybody was splashmans on the highway. Everybody heard about what went on in the 2020 elections at the Ashman's building. That Ashwin building is owned by a man named John. Splashvin is owned by a man named John. And he has a daughter that lives in Germany named Ashma. And Ashma wrote a column in the Starbuck News of the Germans were picking people out late into the night, like in the Nazi days in Germany, and deporting them. And Henry Jeffrey left out mentioning any country in Europe. The president of France is an autocratic president. More people have been wounded, lost limbs, have been blinded to police violence last year, the year before. You call them the yellow vest protesters, people wearing those illuminating yellow vests and what constructors were.
Yeah.
We have never, our police in any PPP government have never wounded people and blind them in the dozens of what happened in France. The president of France intervened, stopped Parliament about to vote against his bill on reducing the retirement age. And he just stepped in and presidential mandate made what Parliament did not approve into law. Do you know what the UK did? The UK rounded up hundreds of Caribbean citizens that have citizenship in UK and deported them back to the Caribbean in something called the Windrush scandal.
Mm-hmm.
Italy has a lady who's above the law. Guyana, let me point out to you, viewers, Guyana is far more democratic than Germany, than Italy, than Hungary, than France. And Henry Jeffrey wrote a letter in the Kaiju News saying, lamenting the lack of respect for democratic self-government in Guyana, Africa, and Asia. Jeffrey did not mention Europe. What they're doing, there's no rule of law. There's no democracy under that lady Meloni in Italy. The German government stopped people from giving talks on Palestine, stop scholars from being awarded accolades bestowed on them by German institutions because he spoke about against what the Israelis were doing to Palestine. Thousands have been injured in the Yellow Vest protests. And Jeffrey said there is no democratic self-government in the countries of Asia, Africa, and he singled out Guyana. This is the man that writes. This is a man that writes for in the name of African Guyanese. And I want you to know, as an African Guyanese, do you think this man can speak for you? Our own Guyanese Ashma John talk about how Germany was deporting people in the wee hours and uncivilized hours of the day. That's 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. We would never do that in Guyana to the Venezuelans, the Cubans, or the Brazilians. We would never do that because we're more democratic than Germany. We would never stop Vincent Alexander, David Hines, Henry Jeffrey. We would never stop an organization in Guyana who is giving them an award for their service to African Guyanese. We would never do that. Germany was denying people when they foreigners who were being ordered, poets, novelists, denied permission for the ceremony to be held. And Henry Jeffrey writes, the Italian Prime Minister has no respect for the rule of law. Do you know there are governments that Henry Jeffrey believes, he called them liberal democracies of Europe. Those people send money to Ukraine without the approval of their parliament. Do you know there are special forces from Europe that are advising the Ukrainian government in the war in Ukraine? Those things have to go before parliament. This is the people that write and tell you to embrace them because they are fighting for your cause I ask you, African Guyanese who are looking at this program right now, could Henry Jeffrey speak for you? Vincent Alexander is no longer going to take to speak to African Guyanese. He's no longer going to use his voice to speak to African Guyanese because he went on a show called the Freddie Kissoon Show, and when people went on Facebook and look at he went on Facebook and look at the show, he saw some nasty comments, people say nasty things about him. From the time the world was born and people became famous, people have been saying nasty things about them. It will go on tomorrow. People, David Hines followers, bench up followers would say, I heard Kissoon and Craig on a program. Kissoon really mad, you know. Do you know what Lincoln Lewis said publicly about me in a letter in the press? I'm an ugly East Indian. Do you think there's anybody in this world, ladies and gentlemen, that can stop me from sitting down here? That can stop me from penning a daily column in the Chronicle because they said to me I'm ugly, and that is a nasty thing said about me, and I would no longer write for the Chronicle? I ask you in all sincerity, do you believe Vincent Alexander could speak for you? When this man Alexander went on a Facebook program of the Freddie Kissoon show and read what people said about him, he called me this morning and said, I'm not going to subject myself to those comments. I am not doing the show with Ravi Dev and James Bond. I said, so our show is being blamed for what people said out there.
For what people feel.
I said, Vincent, you are allowing. I said to him, do you know there's people 75-year-old, 80-year-old, they live in the basement in New York, they're bored, they're racist, they get on their laptop and say, the man Alexander, he's a jackass. I said, Vincent, you go to allow people like that to stop your public intellectualism? And that is what he said. That is what is going to happen. This show is the most watched talk show host
in all of Guyana. Yeah.
Do you know what is 75,000 people watching this show in a population of 800,000 Guyanese? Do you know 75,000 people, nowhere near 75,000 people read the Kaicho News and the Starbook News? And he came on this program to denigrate James Bond, to denigrate the president. He said James Bond shouldn't be with the PPP because the president discriminates against Africans. So he is not going to come and say that anymore because people have called him all sorts of names. Could you call in Friday night in the call-in program and tell us how you feel about what Vincent Alexander has said? Do you want that man to speak in your name as an African Guyanese?
I have one for you, Freddie. And I got to bring up an issue that happened on the East Coast. And I am going straight and I call in names. And what I'm telling you is fact, and I'm not afraid to be sued. So there's an NDC in BV. The BV NDC. There are lots of lands at the back of BV, 20 lands, that the BV NDC believe they owned, in all sincerity. They did some research, but the research was superficial. And just in case anybody got challenged with the word, is what we in Guyanese call tap. They did tap search, right? It wasn't in depth. And they thought they owned the land. So they sold it to John Finance at, I think, $2,000 an acre or $200,000 an acre. $200,000 an acre. They sold it to John Finance.
125 acres.
And they sold 125 acres. To get a feel of what 1 acre is, people usually say is 19 house lots. Right? 19 or 9. Anyway, just think of a piece of place where 10 houses could fit, right? One in front, one behind, one in 10 houses.
It can be, Leno. I live in a community where there are 80 buildings, and I don't think that community is 2 acres. An acre could take more than 19 houses. An acre is a football field.
Right, but 19 at
what
length and width?
Yeah, okay.
At what length and width?
Okay, well, I don't know.
Right, right. I think 100 by 100. Anyway, but it's over 100 acres of land.
125 acres.
125 acres of land. So just process that, and let's move on. And they sold it to John Finance, and the reasoning for selling it was the chairman of the thing of the NDC
at
was
the time, Mr. Bagot.
On the time went on this program, and the reasoning he gave for them selling the land, in my opinion, was cogent. The reasons were well thought out and good, because what they were doing was selling the lands at the back, because if you know how the country lands are set out, they're set out like in tranches. And they were selling the ones at the back. And John Finance, the agreement with John Finance is that they will have to develop a road going to the back. So then the lands in the center here will then become relevant, because the people are living up front. Lands in the center and another set at the back. You sell these at the back and they start developing. It will make these in the center relevant, which is what is more accessible and more usable for residents. Anyway, they eventually found out that some of these lands were owned by private people. Some of these lands were quote-unquote ancestral lands. And ancestral lands, let me just give you a quick definition, is what the slaves would have bought. The freed Africans would have bought from the crown, the British crown at the time, and they had one big transport for it. And then they would then form a co-op and divide it. But the one big transport existed. And they found that a section of this land fall under that system. Some were thing, and then a small portion was owned by the NDC. And so the transaction couldn't go through because the entire section wasn't owned by the NDC. So they went back to John Finance and say, here, come, we want to rescind the agreement, and John Finance agreed. And a third ghost company came from nowhere and bought the rights to the transaction from John Finance. Apparently, the agreement allowed for that. And this is a ghost company that nobody knew of, or at least at the time. And they took the matter to court to enforce the sale, to say, look, you can't get back your money, you have to complete the transaction. And when they went looking for the company, they found the address of the company on an empty plot of land. There's nobody there, and so on. Then they did further research, and they found that the organization, the legal organization that was representing the company, is the organization Hughes, Field and Stobie, led by Nigel Hughes. Now, I want you to follow me here. I'm not accusing Nigel Hughes personally of being involved in anything, but I'm saying his firm was the firm that was retained to enforce a sale of ancestral lands. Though now, here is Nigel Hughes holding himself for the last 4 or 5 years. He has been going to the UN and all kinds of forums to represent African. And David Hines and Vincent Alexander and people of their ilk hold Nigel out to be an African leader and representing African interests. Nigel Hughes himself has written and said a lot about representing African interests. And here you are, the head of a firm, a law firm, representing a ghost company, or at least up to that time it was, it goes to the other people. Probably the legal people knew who the company secretary was and all the kind of thing of the company. But to the people of BV, it was a ghost company. And Nigel Hughes, the head of that firm, the firm took the case. And I'm saying, if I am convicted of representing African interests and a case like that comes to my law firm, and I'm saying if I'm the head of that law firm, even if I am not involved personally in taking the case, these reports, if you understand how law firms work, at certain times, once a week or once every 2 weeks, they sit around in a room and they discuss the cases that are here and strategies to approach these cases. And Nigel Hughes must have known of that case. I'm using logical deduction to say he must have known of the case.
Well, he must have known it was big in the newspapers.
And also, right, the matter was in the newspaper.
All the newspapers.
And I am saying that if I am so convicted of being a representative of the African community, and I go all over the world and I talk on African interest and talk about the PPP government that is doing this and that to Africans and taking away their ancestral land, and your firm is representing a company that is enforcing an action involving ancestral lands, I would tell those people I'm not taking that case. In fact, I would end up going on the opposite side of that company. I will represent the people who want to cancel the transaction. And if these people are only convicted of representing African interests when it suits their own interests, but when it suits them. But when there is a conflict between African interests and their own interests, they advance their own interests. And that is what some of these African leaders who claim to represent you, and a lot of you have been calling me names and calling other African people who choose, we don't have the independence of thought to judge and say, here, look, the PPP is making a turn for the better. Let us give it, let us make our contribution to the politics of Guyana through the PPP and improve the state of the country, give your thing. We don't have the independence of mind to do that. We have to be paid, we got to be drinking soup, we got to lick somebody bottom, and all those kinds of things. But these people who don't lick bottom, mashing you down, and you're accepting it, and then you go into them and say, hail the king. And I am not saying this to attack Nigel Hughes or his firm, but I'm saying this because Nigel Hughes and his firm is a legal firm and they're entitled to represent whomever they want. But I am saying this is that if you are advancing African interests,
but can I cut you?
Anything that cuts across that, you're supposed to stand up.
But can I cut you? If you go to a lawyer to represent you over disputed land, that lawyer has to see something from you. That lawyer has to know that you're located in Z Ben Street. That lawyer has to know the company director is Mavis Singh. The other three directors is Ramsamy and Jones. You just can't go to a company and say we have. The company has to have, because how you know that? How would the company not know that you're in some skullduggery? So use had to know that this company didn't have an address. Because when you go to the company for representation, don't you have to show your TIN? You have to show lawyer tax identification. And then the company now knows you're a bona fide company. They take your case. Go on.
Yeah, so I'm saying this to people so that people, there was a story that we used to read in school. I don't know if those books are still in the school, where Agouti wanted to travel across the river on a boat, but to go on the boat you had to have horns. And then somebody shouted on the bank while he was in the thing, examine the horns, examine the horns. People, when people come to you to represent, say they're representing you and your interests, examine the horns. Examine the horns. Examine how they act when the rubber hits the road.
Hear what I'm asking you. I am now speaking on this program to African Guyanese. I am now addressing African Guyanese. I'm not addressing Indians, Americans, mixed race people. I'm speaking specifically to African Guyanese. When these people are out to psychologically manipulate you. And you can save your psyche by just examining what an Indian guy, Frederick Kissoon, has to say, what a black guy named Leonard Craig has to say. Don't shut out Kissoon because he's Indian. Yeah. Don't say Craig.
Yeah.
If Craig said, or Kissoon said, he's on the surveillance camera cussing out the lady, and he pegged the lady shop because the lady and give him money. Don't because you know this man. Kissoon, what you talking about, the man? If people give you the surveillance camera and you see it, how could you cuss out Kissoon and Craig because they say one of your big friends pegged the man window, the lady window? If he pegged the lady window because he didn't get his way, it's there for you to see. I am giving you things that you can see for yourself. Professor Clive Thomas became the head of a firm called State Asset Recovery Agency, SARA. I was walking my dog on the seawall, and I met the CEO of SARA, a guy named Aubrey Rettmeyer, former soldier. And I said, Aubrey, you speak for African Guyanese. Clive Thomas gone over to the African thing. Sarah is renting a building at $2 million a month to one of the richest Indian family. I said, there is a man that got a lot of buildings that you could rent from. He's a big black supporter named Branford. You can go to the man and ask, see if he got any building. Rettmeyer said he agreed with me, and he made a proposal that wasn't accepted. What is the proposal Rettmeyer made to Clive Thomas? On Comina and Middle Street, there was a place called the Doctor's Quarters. That was not in use. And Rettmeyer said, he said to Thomas, instead of paying $2 million a month to Munishwal, take that money, renovate its government flat, its people's building, and put Sarah inside there. And Thomas turned it down. And for the 4 years Sarah was in existence, Clive Thomas agency, the APNU government, paid Munishwar $2 million a month. That's $24 million yearly by 4 years. You know what that money could have done to resurrect, to repair the doctor's quarters? And then Aubrey Rettmeyer came on this program and said that. And that same Clive Thomas went to Buxton at a meeting and said, because of our money, the government should give every citizen $1 million a year. And guess what Clive Thomas did? You can see, I'm speaking to African Guyanese now, how they play in your psychology. You know what he named his proposal? He didn't name his proposal cash grant from oil. He didn't name his proposal public assistance from oil. That all the writers in the world talk about it. Cash grant from oil, what have you. He named the cash grant from oil the Buxton proposal. So you see, he put a traditional African name on the proposal after the most known African village in Guyana. He was playing on your psychology. The very man who refused to put money in public building to put his agency and paid an East Indian family, one of the richest in Guyana, $2 million a month. He named this proposal the Buxton proposal.
Let me give you another one quickly, and I'm gonna call Kemra Dramjitan's name, and I dare him to make me a liar. Do you remember there is a case, Freddie, with a bond that was rented for Ministry of Health Drugs in Albion?
Yeah.
And the story goes that the guy received money in advance, rent in advance for several months. And he took that same money and made a down payment for a building and then give them that building. And at an AFC meeting, Kemra Dramjitan told me that he sat at cabinet and the matter came up and he felt it was a bad deal. He felt it was corrupt. Well, he didn't use the word corrupt. So let me take that back. He felt it was a bad deal and he wanted to throw a monkey wrench in the deal and he thing, but he stopped. Because he said that he thought that the person who owned the building or who is the center of the transaction was an Afro-Guyanese, and he thought that PNC people were just trying to put some money in an Afro-Guyanese pocket. And because they don't have too many financial opportunities, the way how our country is configured, he said he decided to say nothing. But remember, the name of the owner of the company wasn't presented to them, just the name of the company. And sometimes when a company name, CSS Corporation or whatever, you don't know who is the player behind it. But you sit down at a meeting and you know, and he said that is what he thought. And he said a few days later when he found out that the actual owner was an Indo-Guyanese, he became mad. He felt like he was duped at the meeting. And again, I'm saying, this is an East Indian man speaking about Afro-Guyanese who presented a transaction that if you are in the current government who were in the opposition then, they would refer to it as corrupt. Kemraj would not have used the word corrupt, but he was saying it was a poor deal. And anybody else, knowing that you're paying millions of dollars, I think it was somewhere in the vicinity of $9 million or something like that a month for that building. And a evaluation was done by David Patterson, and he came up saying that the building couldn't conceivably cost more than $1.2 million. And then you're paying this man in advance, and he's taking your advance payment to make a down payment and acquire something. And I am not saying that East Indians shouldn't do business when an Afro-Guyanese is in government, but I'm just showing you that the orientation of the mindset of the people who claim to represent Afro-Guyanese. I'm not saying they should go in government and then let Afro-Guyanese dominate. But you and I both know, the current president knows that Guyanese Africans need a little break when it comes to economic issues. I am satisfied that they're working on such a program, and that is why I am happy to endorse the Irfan Ali government, because I'm satisfied that they're laying the groundwork to work on such a program. But they all know, you know, I know, that Africans in Guyana need a little break, a little economic break. But I am saying the people who claim to have your interest have not been representing that interest unless it suits them. Freddie, we talk a lot about this issue and we forget to deal with Linden. If we could take a couple 2 minutes or so.
But I want to make my contribution, the next remaining 6 minutes of my contribution. So letting African Guyanese know what these African leaders are doing. What these people have done. These people they're not stupid. These people have come up with a strategy. If they are going to survive politically, if they're going to remain relevant, they have to pick on an issue. And they have to pick on an issue that has traction. So guess what is the issue? The issue is, buddy, we gotta survive. And we gotta bang away at the issue that we know black people, it can raise black people consciousness. Black people can think about it and say, yeah. And guess what the issue? Cry discrimination.
Yeah.
Cry anti-African attitude. Because they got no other game in town.
Yeah.
But
one horse pony.
That is not my only thing. My thing is, here was my thing. I'm speaking to addressing African Guyanese. If they're telling you that, you should ask yourself, but the people who are telling me this, can we trust them? Do they have African interests at heart? In truth, all I'm asking you before Craig come in, don't judge me by my name and my hair. I know what these people have done to you. Do you know I am 74 years of age? Do you know at what age I entered politics and became a polling agent for the PPP at Wortmanville School, St. Thomas More Primary School, next to where I grew up in Wortmanville? At 16, from 16, I'm still here at 74. So I know all the betrayers. I know all the cutthroats. And I am telling you, I've seen some of your leaders. I've seen some of your leaders treat you. I could tell you what Mark Benchop did to a black reporter at Kaicho News. Sold him out. I could tell you what Trotman did to a black man who was his security. They are fooling you. And you know why they're fooling you? They can only hold you if they speak about discrimination about African Guyanese. They can't hold your interest on anything else. The operator say we have 5 more minutes to go. I'll show you that.
I want to bring up something that people who claim to be representing African interests always bring up, that mucker issue. Did you know that the government engaged those people for months? And it was 20-something persons, and most of them accepted the government offer, knowing that they live in a land that they do not have a title or a transport for, and they moved into houses and so on, and 4 families were misled, in my opinion, were misled. I am not saying that the compensation offered by government is equal to what they have built, because I was made to understand that they had shops and they had stock and livestock and all of that, and perhaps the compensation was not equivalent. But a respectful discussion the government initiated, and a monkey wrench was thrown into that when so-called African rights leaders descended among those people. They were misled and they refused. Then they were removed. I'm not here saying I agree the manner in which they were removed. Had I been in a position to offer my opinion on how to remove them, or had I been asked to remove them myself, I would have used a different tactic. But granted to be so. The matter was taken to court and they lost. And the government said, we still are going to engage you, we still are going to provide something along the line that is similar that the others who are living on the land got. And when the issue is being presented by these people, you don't hear all of that. They don't tell you that part. They just tell you that the government removed the people and then take the land and give it to rich people. And even that isn't true. The land is alongside the road and it is still there. In fact, a section of the land probably still got a squat or two on it. Not on the specific, but adjacent. So when you listen to these issues, listen to both sides and then make an informed decision. And again, I'm repeating that I am not in agreement with the way, because when I look at those videos, I saw that excavator not only pulled down the house that had stuck in it, they went and break up things more and what have you, and I find that to be a little jarring. But there are other facts surrounding the entire thing, and the government has acquiesced to the situation and has, be accommodative, and that aspect of it. So I am asking people to take a second look at some of these issues and at some of these people, examine their horns, and don't run along with them and about the and attack. They want to sit, some of them, overseas and have themselves protected, but they want to attack people that are even Africans like them. And when they're attacked, you see what Vincent Alexander do? You see what you do? Because we ask him, he talks so many things about James Bond. Let me explain to you why he ain't coming. We ask him to come on a separate program, sit with James Bond, and let's talk frankly and trash it out. James Bond say, I'm coming. Alexander called back to say he ain't coming. Also, Ravi, they've called us and say, here, man, I saw what Alexander said. I think some of his positions are dangerous. And I want to talk with him. I want to have a conversation. I want to confront him. Alexander say he ain't coming. And these are the people that want to represent your interest.
But he is stupid. He's stupid enough to say he ain't coming because when you see the comments made about him. Now, I'm asking you, for somebody who knows Alexander, asking you to examine your own mind, to think of how a public figure with 45 years public involvement in politics could say, man, you see what those people say about me, I was on your show. You see the nasty comments those people say to me. I don't want to expose myself to that. You're exposed the minute you get publicly and say Brian Lara isn't a good cricketer. You're exposed to criticism the minute you say that Africa is not a good continent. You're exposed to public criticism the once you say, I don't like India. There's no good country. Once you make that public statement and you believe in it, people go to say things about you. You have to get on with it. Look, the operator say our time has come. This program started with me telling you that Vincent Alexander called me this morning to say he would not come on the Freddie Kissoon show anymore because when he go on Facebook and he see the comments, he can't take those comments. The things people say about him. That is very foolish for any human being. It means what people say. You are shaping your life and based on what people say.
He's probably ashamed of what he said. He's probably even ashamed.
Let me close by saying, do not allow what people say about you to make you change your psychology and your life. It will always happen. When tonight people looking at this program will say Kissoon is a madman for truth, and they will put that. You ever see the comments people say about me?
And we don't delete any.
No,
we allow all the comments unless you threaten somebody or commit treason or something to that effect. We leave the comments right there.
Look, we gotta go. The operator said a minute ago our time is up. Have a pleasant Wednesday evening. We have interesting guests Monday that are going to tell you how they think the election results are going to end up. Thanks for being with us on behalf of the reliable Leonard